Welcome. You have made it to Dish 101. Understand the body's secret shield. Today's day one, and before we get started, we're going to go over the medical disclaimer of this not being medical advice. It is just informational purposes only. I'm sharing my health journey and what I discovered along the way. So hopefully you had a chance to download the workbook that corresponds to this course. It should have been in your email. But if you haven't and you don't want to try to find your email, I also included the links up above. And there's two options. You can click one to download it and do it on your computer, or there's the other one is available for being printed. I want you to be able to follow along in the notes section, but answer the first question also is, what are you hoping to get from this course? Feel free to pause the video anytime you want to finish filling in information. So the first thing I want to say is that I am proud of you. I'm glad you're showing up, and I'm glad you're willing to look into something that you may never have heard before. Plato says it very well. He says, to begin is the most important part of any quest, and by far the most courageous. And winning against invisible illnesses is my motto. So 2 important things to remember as we're doing this course is, first of all, like I mentioned, I think the workbook is very important so that you can follow along in the notes section. I also think it's important to be able to write down and reflect on what you learn. It elevates the learning process. The second thing I want to make sure that you keep in mind is that I really would like for you to watch the course in order, because the ideas build one upon each other. And so today, I already told you about the objective. The objective was going to be to see what lies ahead and to learn a little bit about your instructor, which is me. So today, we're also going to cover the mini course structure, the agenda for the next 5 days, and we'll go from there. So the mini course structure is not your typical mini course. I give you 2 days to have time to watch each session. It will help make it easier to keep up with, and it also has short lessons. The course is set up to be delivered on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 2 weeks. But for, say, example, if you don't watch it until Tuesday, then the next lesson won't be available until Thursday and then Saturday, and then the cycle will repeat. So you have 1 day in between, 1 day in between, and then 2 days in between, and then it repeats. And if you're curious to know why I have a kitten in a box on this page, this is Moxie, and she is going to be the case study I'm going to share with you on day 6. The lesson itself will have a 5 to 10 minute video addressing one specific objective for that day. And that objective will get broken down into 3 main points of the lesson, final thoughts, and what to expect for the next lesson. And then in the workbook, you'll also see that there will be 3 to 5 questions that you can answer. And on this page, you'll also have a place where you can find more resources. And in the resource section, there are some blog posts that may be of interest to you or as it pertains to the lesson. And it will also include other resources as well. On the last few days, I do recommend, if this course resonates with you, to consider purchasing my books and or signing up for the wait list for my course and or coaching with me. So now we're on to the second main point for today, is the agenda for the next 5 days. We know how it's going to be covered, so what are we going to be covering? And so day 1, is what we're doing right now. We are doing an overview view of what the next 2 weeks are going to look like, and you're going to learn a little bit about my health journey. The second day, we're going to talk about 2 types of people, and we're going to understand DISH and what makes us different. And day 3, we're going to talk about DISH origin, because even though it's frequency medicine, I am combining 5 scientific principles that suggest we do have a DISH. And so on day 3, we're going to talk about the 5 scientific principles. And then on day 4, that's when I'm going to combine those together and show you how I think DISH is the missing piece. And I hope it will help gain insight on why inflammation may go from acute to chronic for some of us. And on day 5, we're going to talk about the needed DISH. And what I want you to do there is I want you to watch and see how easy it is to make a manual DISH for prevention. And then on the last day, day 6 is going to be the case study. And you're going to get to see Moxie and see her story. And you'll be able to observe the difference a manual DISH can make. So that's for the agenda. As far as who I am, my name is Cindy Wilson, and I go by the pen name of Cindy What If. Here's a few of my credentials, and I want to point out to you that I do have a Bachelor of Science in mathematics. And so when I couldn't find answers for my health problems, I started looking myself. And Michael J. Fox says it very well. He says, the message is so simple, yet it gets forgotten. The people living with the condition are the experts. And I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I am saying that I have been living with conditions for a very long time. Here's just to look, you can pause it if you want to see the challenges I had. But one of the challenges was my mom became pregnant with me in Camp Lejeune during the water contamination. If you're not sure what that is, you can Google it, you'll find it. And it was a bad deal. And I actually was a twin. She lost my twin in the first trimester. I was overseas twice before the age of 10, and problems that came with that. It just seemed frustrating because it always seems like there was another health challenge around the corner. And I remember being tired all the time as a teen and young adult. And I was convinced that I was either lazy or just being too sensitive. And I couldn't trust my body to do what I wanted it to do. And it was so frustrating. Well, in 2000, they did finally tell me that I had chronic fatigue and that there was no cure for it. So I kind of needed to toughen up and just go on with life. So that's what I did. But then in 2009, when I was just incredibly frustrated and I kept demanding more tests, they finally realized that I had a faulty pituitary gland. And they told me my life expectancy was 38 to 42. And I was barreling down on my 41st birthday. So that wasn't good either. I believe the reason I'm still around is what I discovered with DISH. And so in 2015, I was told my pituitary gland was a non-issue now. That being said, it's frustrating sometimes because when I do what I am about to share with you, my symptoms decreased significantly. When I stopped, my symptoms returned. And my blog post elaborates on this idea because the concept of DISH is very simple, but implementing it is difficult because the body is very complex. And I'll include a blog post down below that gives you an idea of what I mean by that. So the final thoughts I want to share with you on this first day is that using DISH complements other methods. When other methods didn't work for me, when I started understanding DISH and implementing DISH in my life, it made the methods that didn't previously work to now start working for me. And the interesting thing about this is if you're like me, you know people who are able to take medications and get better. Or you may know someone who was sick, adopted the healthy lifestyle, and got better. Or maybe if you're like me, neither way worked. I felt left out of the game of life. I think it's because we're missing something. I don't think it's a sliding scale between healthy gut and pathogens, between fighting bad guys and having enough good guys to do the job. I think we're missing a third piece, and I believe that third piece is DISH. And so knowing about DISH and doing what I'm going to share with you, it gave me a way to get back into the game of life. Maybe not full capacity, but not severely allergic to everything and being bedbound either. So the key takeaway today is that the DISH philosophy complements other methods. It's not in place of anything. And coming up on the next lesson, we will talk about how I think there are two types of people and how DISH discerns them one from another. Meanwhile, give yourself a few minutes to answer the questions at the end of the lesson. And feel free to check out the resources I provided. They can be found at the bottom of this page. Welcome back. Day 2, DISH 101. Understand the body's secret shield. And before we get started, as always, the medical disclaimer that this is not intended for medical advice. It's informational purposes only. It is sharing what I discovered on my health journey. So welcome back to day 2. And just as a quick review, on day 1, we learned that knowing about DISH didn't replace other methods, but DISH made those methods to now work for me. And so on day 2, we said that we're going to cover the two types of people and understand DISH and what makes us different. So we'll get started on that. And so the first thing we're going to cover is two types of people. The second thing we're going to cover is what makes us different. And the third thing we're going to cover is DISH's two jobs. So the two types of people. So today I want to share with you a new perspective I have when it comes to autoimmune disease. I invite you to challenge the obvious statement of there being two types of people and digging deeper into it with me on exploring their differences. Because we know there's two types of people. We know that there's people without autoimmune diseases and there's people with autoimmune diseases. It's a very obvious statement, but I want to take it a step further. One of us has our body doing what it is supposed to do. Bad guys come in, the body attacks them, then they leave. The other has it to where it appears the body's attacking not only the bad guys, but the good guys as well. And the bad guys don't leave, and they just seem to hang around. So what makes us different? Why is that? Acknowledging this obvious statement that there are two types of people, what makes us different? We both have the same immune system, but one attacks and the other doesn't. It doesn't make sense. Instead of looking at what the body is now doing, attacking itself, what if we look at it differently and ask, what is the body no longer doing? Enter DISH. I am here to share with you my hypothesis and how it has affected my health. DISH stands for defensive, because it protects our body, individual, because it's unique to each one of us, shield, because it does this pre-sorting that I'm going to share with you, and hypothesis means an educated guess. So it's still in the learning stages. So originally, it is believed that those who do not have an autoimmune disease do not have the body attacking itself. But what if the reason isn't that? What if it's because they have a working DISH, is why the body's not attacking itself? They don't know they have one because it's automatic. The environment and other factors don't seem to affect them. This could be why they see people like us as being too sensitive. Maybe we are too sensitive, but not in the way they are thinking. With my DISH malfunctioning, I am not receiving the protection or assistance that a working DISH provides. Everything seems to magnify on me. If I became ill, I stayed ill longer. If I had one food allergy, I gained more. I believe it can be continued down this path as far as to say that maybe it is why when you get an autoimmune disease, you're at a much higher chance of getting another one. If my problems stem from my DISH not working, how can I get it to work? Or to even be present to do the work? I started to try to manually do what the body was meant to do. The results shocked me. It backed up my suspicions or my budding hypothesis, whichever you want to call it. And my hypothesis then became the idea that we need a DISH. So what do I do if I don't have one? Am I stuck to only do what my body without a working DISH will let me do? So I came out of that realizing that if my body wasn't making the DISH automatically, I could make it manually. And I was wondering, is that what I had been doing all along? And I just didn't realize it. I started making the DISH manually, and it made a difference for me, my kids, my pets, and friends. Also, when DISH would start working properly, I no longer needed to make the manual DISH. So we need a DISH regardless if it's automatic or manual. And so let's touch a little on why I think this DISH matters so much. DISH's two jobs. For this mini course, we're going to dive in and focus mainly on job number 2, the sorting, what the body encounters. The only reason I mention job number 1 is because it is what makes job number 2 possible. What I'm referring to here is a pre-sorting that I believe is occurring that we aren't currently aware of. As scientists and researchers have been studying autoimmune disease, it frequently returns back to a bad guy the body is unable to fight, or the body appears to be attacking itself. We will get into this further in a later lesson about how I don't think the immune system changed what it was doing on its own accord. I think it started receiving wrong information. Wrong information because the pre-sorting wasn't happening. And so when DISH is not working automatically, pre-sorting fails. The body gets confused. Are you a bad guy? Are you a good guy? And so it ends up letting the bad guys stay, and we reject the good guys. We need to sort the good guys from the bad guys, or problems happen. And I think that problem is the chronic inflammation. Why do I think DISH matters? Because when I realized I didn't have an automatic DISH and needed one, I thought about making my DISH manually. When I did, things changed. Methods that did not work in the past for me would now work. It also reduced my symptoms. And so wrong information was causing wrong decisions to be made. It was having me keep my bad guys and lose my good guys. But wait, before we get too far down this road, we need to learn a little more about DISH before we learn about what DISH is and isn't doing properly. So my final thoughts for you today is that realizing our bodies are different in this huge way could explain so many things. The more I study DISH, the more answers I see. And so could it bring an end to the medical gaslighting that we have? Maybe it's the beginning of finding new answers so that we can finally overcome this autoimmune disease epidemic. Or is it the beginning to new answers so that we can get help and get better? And so the key takeaway for day number 2 is that I believe there are 2 types of people: those who have an automatic DISH and those who need to have a manual DISH because their automatic DISH isn't working properly. So maybe you're asking, but where does this DISH come from? And why is the pre-sorting failing? And how does this tie all together? Well, I'm glad you asked. On Friday, we're going to dive into the 5 scientific principles that I combined to come up with DISH. Meanwhile, remember there are a handful of questions to ask and reflect upon, as well as other resources available if you want to know more. See you on Friday, and I wish you well. Welcome back. It is day 3, Dish 101, Understand the Body's Secret Shield. I'm glad you're here, but before we get started, the medical disclaimer as always. This is not intended as medical advice. It is my personal experience and understandings of what I think might be going on. Just a reminder, DISH stands for Defensive Individual Shield Hypothesis, and it consists of 4 things. And before we dive into how I came up with this idea, a quick review of what we have learned so far. On day 1, we talked about how knowing about DISH didn't replace other methods, but DISH made those methods to now work for me. And on day 2, we talked about how DISH is necessary regardless if it's automatic or manual. Those who do not have an autoimmune disease, I believe, have a working DISH that is automatic. And those who do have autoimmune disease, I believe their automatic DISH is malfunctioning. And so day 3 on our agenda is we're going to be talking about the DISH origin. And what I mean by the origin, it's the 5 scientific principles that suggest we have a DISH. And so to break that down for today, it's going to be the science behind DISH, and then we're going to talk about seeing what isn't obvious, and then we're going to talk about the components that make DISH. So getting started with the science behind DISH. For those of you who are unfamiliar to how the body works, in a nutshell, our circulatory system is more like a soaker hose than a garden hose. Why? Because of the space between the cells allow fluid to leak out of the blood capillaries and into the body. And the circulatory system is the blood part. And so this leaking into the body is where the lymphatic system does its job. And so the lymphatic system is a major part of our immune system. Its job is to grab up just the bad guys and make attackers to remove them. And when it gets crowded, I'll explain how it contributes to health problems when we combine these 5 principles together in our next lesson. But for now, think of it being too crowded with all the soaker hose liquid coming out of the circulatory system and into the body to where the lymphatic system has to pick it up. Though the name sounds impressive, fluid dynamics and pressure systems, it's really quite simple. It means if a primary outlet is blocked, pressure builds up and it forces the fluid to find an alternative path. And so we see this often in Texas with flooding, right? When the river breaches the bank, it will go down roads, it find a place to go, right? And so I'll give an example of a demo experiment at the bottom of this page in the resource section for you to get a better understanding of that. But basically what it's saying, when you have all this fluid, the fluid has to go somewhere. And if the way it wants to go is blocked, it will find a different place to go. And so point number 4 is probably a familiar equation to most of you, but I don't know if you know what it means or not. I see it in cartoons even. It's kind of hilarious because it's just kind of like a joke, even E equals mc squared. But do they realize that what it means is that mass and energy are the same thing? This matters later when we combine all of these concepts together. And then the last thing that we're going to talk about out of the 5 scientific principles is, again, I don't want you to be intimidated by the terminology, but destructive interference. If you look at it simply, it means destroy because it was interfered. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that like wave frequencies can cancel each other. And so those are the 5 principles. And so now we're going to talk about seeing what isn't obvious. When I was at my all-time low, I had already been reading a book a month trying to figure out the missing piece to my health. One day in my homeschooling time with my teenager, we came across this quote from the famous philosopher Descartes, and I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. I apologize. But in the quote, it says, "I found that in moving only by logical steps, each of which was simple and obvious, from premises, each of which was also simple and obvious, you began to reach conclusions that were not at all simple and not at all obvious." I decided to take his advice. It took about 5 years to see how it was all connected, but in this lesson, we'll go over all the parts included. In the next lesson, we will combine those parts together to explain how they make DISH. And so we talked about the 5 scientific principles that I combined, okay? And then using that process of logically thinking about the most basic, simple thing and going from there, I came up with my hypothesis. And so the importance of this DISH pre-sorting may seem obvious once we break it down into tiny pieces like Descartes recommends. But the obvious but not so obvious is if we make the waves the same, the problem gets canceled. When DISH is doing its job, the detox organs have less work to do and they don't send out misinformation. And so the components that make this DISH, what are they? Well, I believe it is the coating on the skin creates an energy shield with a frequency to it. And the coating reached there because of the fluid had to go someplace. I'll explain more of that where the wrong programming happens when it can't go to the surface of the skin in a later lesson. So this frequency does the pre-sorting by canceling the good guys that don't make it to the surface of the skin. And when by canceling it, if the good guys get canceled, they don't need to go through the lymphatic system and in turn be labeled as a bad guy. If this sounds suspiciously like homeopathy, yes and no. It involves like cures like, but so does modern medicine with some of the stuff in the protocol they use. But it explains why likeness is needed for balanced nutrients and hormones. And so when these 5 principles are combined, I came up with DISH. This dish has 2 jobs. I'll explain the combination of these principles more in detail on Monday. But for now, know that when these principles are combined, there is a coating on the skin that acts like a shield for the body. This shield gives off a frequency unique to each person that provides the body with a way to pre-sort what it encounters. I believe what this pre-sorting dish does is key to why there are 2 types of people. And so some final thoughts for today is that all 5 scientific principles I have shared with you are facts. They just have never been combined in a way to see what I see as it pertains to our health and DISH. And so the key takeaway for today is that DISH is based off of 5 scientific principles, but they're combined. But what does all of this mean? I believe it is the missing piece we have been looking for. The reason why we are different, the reason why we are misunderstood, the reason methods and treatments that are supposed to work don't work very well or not at all. The reason we seem to be more sensitive to modern world living than others. If I can get others to understand DISH and its impact, I think we have a better chance of being understood and helped. And so on Monday, we're going to talk about, as I mentioned earlier, combining those pieces from those 5 scientific principles. You're going to have the opportunity to see the impact DISH could make in understanding invisible illnesses and helping us to get better. So stick around. As always, I've included a few questions for you to answer in your workbook and additional resources for you at the bottom of this page. And so until then, have a good weekend, and I'll see you on Monday. Here we are, day 4, beginning of the 2nd week. DISH 101, understand the body's secret shield. As always, before we get started, I want to say that this is a medical disclaimer. It is my personal experience and stuff that I have discovered along the way on my health journey that I want to share with others. It is not intended for medical advice. So I've been showing you this acronym for a while now. Today we're going to break it down and see it at work. And so DISH stands for Defensive Individual Shield Hypothesis. And so before we get going, let's do a quick review from last week. Day 1, knowing about DISH didn't replace other methods, but DISH made those methods to now work for me. And on day 2, we talked about how I believe that DISH is necessary regardless if it's automatic or manual. We know there are 2 types of people, those with and without autoimmune diseases. DISH clarifies this into a person with and without an automatically working DISH. And then on day 3, just because we're talking about frequency medicine, it doesn't mean it's a woo-woo idea thing. There's logic and 5 scientific principles that are combined together for my DISH hypothesis. And these are the 5 scientific principles. I hope you had a chance to do a little research on your own to see how those different principles function. And so today, as I promised, I'm going to show you how combining those 5 principles will show you how DISH could be made and why it is important to understand. And so what that looks like for today is what is happening, and then the source of wrong information, which I call misinformation. And then we're going to cover the chain reaction that happens because of this misinformation. And so what is happening? Chronic inflammation is present with individuals with chronic fatigue, as well as autoimmune diseases. It is frequently attributed to these factors: industrialized countries, genetics, infectious agents, environment, hormones, viruses, toxins, and then something happened and the body is now attacking itself. Sometimes the stuff on the list changes and it varies from list to list, and they update it or modify it. But one thing that is always consistent is there's a something happened. Well, why didn't the something happen not happen to both people? Not everyone is affected by these things as others. Why? I think it boils down to a working DISH. Let me explain. If you recall the list I just showed you, the researchers are looking for what triggers the chronic inflammation response. I think we won't find the answer that way. There are far too many triggers. I want to suggest that it isn't about the trigger. I think it's about the switch being flipped. Something happened causing the switch to flip to off. When it is off, the pre-sorting does not happen. And with it missing, I think acute inflammation becomes chronic. I think this acute inflammation becomes chronic because with this switch flipped off, the body is failing to pre-sort properly. So with that in mind, could chronic inflammation just be a constant tug of war in the body? I think this acute inflammation becomes chronic because with this switch flipped off, the body is failing to pre-sort properly. And because of this, our bodies are confused. They are unsure of what to do with what they come into contact with because the good guys may become combined, and this confusing information confuses the body. Are you a bad guy? Are you a good guy? We let the bad guys stay and we reject the good guys. What if chronic inflammation was just the lymphatic system receiving wrong information? Wrong information causing wrong decisions. Keep the bad guys, get rid of the good guys. What I mean by getting rid of the good guys, it looks like the body's attacking ourselves, which is the good guy, and then the bad guy not being able to leave the body. But where is this wrong information coming from, and what is happening because of it? That's point number 2, the source of the wrong information. So, as I mentioned, the acronym DISH stands for Defensive Individual Shield Hypothesis. So we're going to break it down here with this automatic DISH. So if you look closely here, D stands for defensive. It's a coating on the surface of the skin forming a tiny force field of protection. So if you look at this example, this red part here is the blood that I was talking about. And then the cells in the capillaries allow stuff to leave the blood. This stuff here, the lymphatic system looks at and investigates. If it's a good guy, it leaves it alone. And if it's a bad guy, it grabs it up, makes attacker cells with it, and helps the body to fight the problem. And so I in DISH is individual because it's unique to each person and it depends on what enters their body. The S is the shield that is doing this pre-sorting. And so if you look down here, we'll pretend like this is the surface of the skin. Well, the stuff that doesn't get grabbed up by the lymphatic system comes out onto the surface of the skin. And so good and bad guys can escape there. I won't go into too much detail about the bad guys because that's at a lot higher level of explaining that is too much to cover in this course. And so, but this coating gives off a frequency. And so this frequency, I believe, my educated guess is it makes the job easier for the body. And so now let's take a look at a broken dish. With a broken dish, I didn't show you the blood up here above, but that's where this stuff is coming from, right? But if it can't go to the surface of the skin, the fluid dynamics that I was telling you about, it has to go somewhere, right? And so what happens, I believe, is this is where it breaks, is because since it has to go somewhere, it gets redirected and it gets grabbed up by the lymphatic system and it gets combined with the bad guy. And so then when the good guy becomes grouped with the bad guy, I believe that combo comes around. When it comes around again, the system will be confused, and that's where the chronic inflammation comes into play. And so let's break this down a little bit further. I want to show you how this is the misinformation. So if we're looking at the lymphatic system and it's becoming too crowded, the good guy road becomes blocked. And when the good guy road becomes blocked, he needs to go someplace. And so what does he end up doing? He gets combined and he gets mixed up with the bad guy, and they get redirected into the lymphatic system and they get grabbed up with the bad guy. And so then when the body ends up attacking itself, because when it tries to come through the system again, it has a bad guy attached to it. So it's being rejected as being a bad guy. And so the system runs low on good guys, so no longer able to function properly. And that brings us to the chain reaction. Because of this dish malfunctioning, I believe it causes a chain reaction that causes misinformation in the lymphatic system, dominoing its way to impacting the nervous system as well as other parts of the body. So in step 1, the misinformation causes essential nutrients and hormones to be rejected because we're rejecting the good guys. And so then in step 2, the rejection causes the deficiency because we can only reject the good guys for so long before we're deficient in them. And so then in step 3, this deficiency causes missing information because the brain, the nervous system, these different organs need to have these good guys in order to function properly. And so with this missing information, it prevents proper body function, as well as the lack of nutrients for these other organs. With these two problems gone, chronic inflammation and nutritional deficiencies, how many health problems would remain? And the amazing thing here is that when my dish was in place manually, chronic inflammation subsided for me, and I was able to utilize the nutrients I needed. And so my final thoughts here is that to win against the enemy, we really need to know who the enemy really is. And I believe the number one problem here is two main things. We have the misinformation and we have missing information. And it causes the good guy deficiencies in my body. And the deficiencies caused missing information to happen. And then the missing information prevented my body from functioning properly. And so I believe the key is to stop the misinformation, because the misinformation causes the chain reaction. And so I think the solution is to correct the problem. Stop the misinformation from occurring by making a manual dish, replenish the deficiencies, insert the missing information, and avoid misinformation from happening again. And so the key takeaway here now is that dish is needed regardless if it is automatic or manual. So you may be thinking, well, what now? Well, if everyone needs a dish and my automatic dish was not working correctly, I needed to find a way to make it manually. And so that's what I did. We have only 2 lessons left to go. In our next lesson on Wednesday, I'm going to share with you the simplest form of making a dish. And on the last day, you'll see the case study that involves Moxie's recovery. So I'll see you on Wednesday. Well, we're almost done. We have 2 lessons left to go. Today's day 5 for Dish 101 mini-series on how to understand the body's secret shield. As always, before we get started, here's the medical disclaimer. It is informational purposes only. I'm just sharing my personal journey of overcoming my health challenges and the stuff that I learned along the way. And as a reminder, DISH stands for Defensive Individual Shield Hypothesis. And we're going to do a little quick review before we get on with our lesson for today. On day 1, we talked about how knowing about DISH didn't replace other methods, but DISH made those methods to now work for me. On day 2, we talked about how DISH is necessary regardless if it's automatic or manual. And so a person that does not have an autoimmune disease, I believe, has a DISH that is automatic. And a person who does have an autoimmune disease, I believe their DISH is malfunctioning and that we need to make it manually. On day 3, I talked about the 5 scientific principles that I combined to come up with this DISH hypothesis. And on day 4, I explained the chain reaction that I believe that is happening when our DISH is malfunctioning. And so today, day 5, we're going to talk about the needed dish. I want you to see how easy it is to make a manual dish for prevention purposes. And so the way we're going to do that is we're going to break it down into looking at the big picture, and then we're going to look at how to work a manual dish, and then I'm going to explain the manual dish framework to you. So the first thing is the big picture. So if you look back in what happened during the chain reaction, we know that we are dealing with 2 main things. In this lesson, we're going to focus on avoiding this from happening. I call this guardian mode. It's just about preventing the wrong programming from happening. If it has already occurred, different measures needed to be taken. Each one required its own method, but we are focusing mainly on the value of prevention alone, that DISH has promises of making a difference. So the big picture is that missing information, we need to reprogram the brain. And for misinformation, we need to reprogram the lymphatic system. And this is my new view, because when DISH is not automatic, I believe acute inflammation becomes chronic inflammation. And so when DISH is not sorting automatically, I manually do the DISH's job of sorting. And so DISH can be automatic or manual. It just has to be there. It just takes a lot more work to do it. And when I make a DISH manually, that means I am helping the lymphatic system with the pre-sorting. So let's look at a working manual DISH. So if you look back at our broken DISH again, we see the coding is missing. We need something there to make the frequency we need. So how do we do that? Well, a person's energy field varies from 1 inch to 6 feet from their body. And the healthier a person is, the wider and more uniform this field is. And so this field is the coating on the surface of the skin that's missing, that's causing the frequency. We need to get that frequency within that field. And the way I did that is that I would put objects and place them at different distances, enabled me to adjust my dish manually. I controlled the workload for my body by having some on me, some having them near me, some on a certain place on my body, or some even just in the room. And so the frustrating part here is that dish is continually adjusting throughout the day. But by being aware of a dish and knowing objects affect my dish was a game changer for me. I wouldn't wish it on anyone to have to do this dish's job of sorting, but it gave me my life back, and it was worth the hassle to me. And I'm just sharing it with you in what I have found to work. So the manual dish in a nutshell is having the good guys in my energy field. Pre-sorting occurs and much is accomplished. I'm not really doing anything other than putting what's needed in my energy field. And so what it could be is anything, but the end goal is that it needs to be the good guy that's being affected. Whereas in my energy field varies also. It ranges from being taped on my body in a particular place, or having it in my pocket, or just in the room so that I can walk by it occasionally. I know it sounds crazy, but it works. And when you see and understand the science behind why it works, it's freeing, because the flare-ups are no longer random and unpredictable. And so a manual dish stops the bad guys and good guys from getting mixed, and it allows the body to do what it was meant to do, because by focusing on having the good guys on the outside of my body in my dish manually, it prevented them from becoming attached and mixed with the bad guy and being forced through the lymphatic system, where I think acute becomes chronic. And so a manual dish works as well as an automatic dish. However, I have to make it work. It's simple, but not easy. And so the concept is very simple, but implementing it is difficult because the body is complicated. And so it's like the difference between doing a math problem with a calculator, that's the automatic dish, or doing a big long math problem with just pen and paper. It takes a lot more time, but you can still get the right answer. It's just more work. And so that's what a manual dish is. And so the framework for a manual dish is what we're going to be talking about now. And because a manual dish can do the same sort, when dish is present, acute inflammation doesn't become chronic inflammation. And that happened over and over again for me. And so I made a plan, I worked the plan, and then I reevaluated what needed to be in my dish. But with a plan, there is a process. And with a process, there is progress. And with progress, I saw results. So I don't think it's about the body changing its purpose. I don't think the body is attacking itself. It's about the body receiving false information. And so therefore, its prime directive hasn't changed. It's just getting the wrong information now. And so if you think about it, I don't know if there's any Star Wars fans, but when the stormtroopers, they were the good guys until they got false information, and then they became the bad guys. Same thing. So let's prevent this false information from happening by making the dish manually. And so my final thoughts for today for you is that it seems easy enough, but how do I actually make a manual dish? What, where, when? Do I need to have these different things to make a frequency for me? The dish is continually adjusting. There is a process, and we will cover what that looks like on our final lesson. Key takeaway day number 5 is there is a framework for how, when, and where to make a manual dish. And just having a working dish changed things for me. Okay, that's a lot to process, but what does it look like in action? Well, that will bring you to our final lesson on Friday, and it's a case study of Moxie. You get to meet Moxie and learn about how making a manual dish made all the difference in the world for her. See you on Friday. Last day, day 6. I'm hoping that you are having your mind blown, and I hope you are starting to do your own research, and I hope that you are glad that you took a part of this mini course. And so today we're going to wrap it all up with Moxie, and then we'll be done with Dish 101, Understanding the Body's Secret Shield. But before we get started, as always, I want to share again the medical disclaimer that this is my personal journey and my personal struggles and what I learned from it. It is not intended for medical advice. So our final and quick review, we have what DISH stands for, which is defensive, it protects our body. Individual, it's unique to everyone. Shield, because it has this pre-sorting that it's supposed to be doing. And hypothesis, which is my educated guess. So on day 1, we learned that knowing about DISH didn't replace other methods, but DISH made those methods to now work for me. And on day 2, we talked about how DISH is necessary regardless if automatic or manual. We also learned that new possibilities open up when we look at the differences of those with and without autoimmune diseases in a different way. And on day 3, we understand it isn't woo-woo, but scientific principles involved in the frequency healing process as it pertains to DISH. On day 4, we learned about the chain reaction and what I believe occurs when DISH is malfunctioning. We get the misinformation that snowballs into missing information. And lastly, I shared with you that on day 5, a manual DISH stops the bad guys and good guys from mixing. It allows the body to do what it was meant to do. I know this because making a manual DISH for myself with the correct information had worked every time for me. I have many examples I could share, but today we're going to focus on Moxie, our rescue kitten. I'll let you see with your own eyes, and just for the record, zero AI was involved in the footage I am going to share. And so what it looks like for today is we're going to meet Moxie, and then I'm going to show you how I chose the DISH for Moxie, and then we're going to talk about Moxie's recovery. So let's meet Moxie. So although the kitten I share with you did not have an autoimmune disease, she was struggling a lot. Inflammation was definitely present, and was it chronic yet? I'm not sure. So if you notice, she has a hard time breathing. You can even see her neck constricting as she's trying to take a breath. And when I pet her, she does okay, but she tended to try to back away from me when I tried petting her. And she had already been on antibiotics for almost a week at this point. Secondly, I want to explain to you what I did when I chose the DISH for Moxie. We're going to be talking about the basic prevention level to know what objects to use and where to place them. And remember, this is just the kitten's current problem, and I was primarily seeking to make sure she did have a DISH. And so the first thing I would do is I would ask about the proximity. I needed to be aware of where the battle was taking place in her body. For her, what it looked like is we knew that she had pneumonia, and we knew that she had some kind of virus that was making her system weak. And so we knew that her lungs were being affected, and we knew that her detox organs as well as her gut were being affected. And so what I needed to do is I needed to think about what kind of good guys the lungs, the detox organs, and the gut needed. And then I also needed to think about what she was being exposed to. So this would be called exposure. And what basically consisted of was keeping her environment consistently the same, which was really pretty easy because we were supposed to keep her isolated in a dark room to try to save her eyes. And so by doing that, we need to also be aware that when we were giving her medicine regularly, we didn't remove it from the room. We left the empty dropper next to her, and so that it would stay in her energy field, and she wouldn't have to be processing out that information as well. And so we also did that with her food and the tools that we had, her bowl and all the other things that were in her surroundings, the bedding, anything else that she was around, we wanted to keep that the same. And so it's relatively easy to find and do something about the proximity and the exposure. And the proximity ones, I had several of those good guys on hand already because I had been doing it for myself. And so that's pretty easy. But the hard part is that if there's a piece missing from DISH, it still doesn't work completely. And so the third factor is what I call a resemblance. And so it's knowing if there is a bad guy that is similar to a good guy. And in my personal experience, because I have the Camp Lejeune water contamination in me, strontium-90, very radioactive, was in that water. And that's definitely a bad guy. But strontium without the 90 is a good guy that the body needs. Well, if my body can't tell the difference between strontium-90 and strontium, it's either going to be keeping the strontium-90 or it's going to be rejecting, which was what my body was doing, the strontium. And it kept rejecting it until I made this manual DISH. And so it went from having to take 3 to 5 pills a day of strontium to only needing to take it a couple times, and then I no longer need to take it. And so for resemblance in her situation, based on something else I had learned, is there was a type of medicine in injectable when she had her injection to try to help her get over her pneumonia. there was a good chance that there was something in there that was mimicking oxytocin. And so we went ahead and we put oxytocin in her energy field as well. And when we did that, we saw a big change, because once Moxie had everything she needed in her shield, her transformation was quite quick. And just before my daughter and I decided to make the manual dish for Moxie, we had tried getting her to eat, but she wouldn't. And once the dish was in place completely, her countenance changed. We decided to try to feed her again. And she ate the whole bottle and had a distended tummy and slept until her next feeding. And she hadn't done any of that before. And then for her second feeding, it was the same as well. And so let me show you in this footage of what the difference made. And so Moxie's recovery. So in this video, you can see how she is being very responsive to me petting her. In fact, she's leaning into it. And she has significantly more energy. And she even has the strength to meow and make noises and to move around. And here is a little bit over 10 days after the last video I showed you, and she's completely recovered. So, as far as the final thoughts go for today, I really think that my original intent was to just stay alive long enough to figure out a way to prevent my children from having my poor health. It evolved into what I believe is a major discovery in how I think acute inflammation becomes chronic. And in turn, I think this can make a big difference in influencing how we look at autoimmune diseases. I believe DISH brings hope for a solution because it helps remove the chronic inflammation and nutritional deficiencies challenge. With that in mind, my hypothesis explains a previously unknown connection between the lymphatic system, the nervous system, and the surface of the skin. The potential impact this complementary system has on preventing and solving the autoimmune disease crisis. Because where does my confidence in this method come from? It's because not only have I prevented more problems from happening on myself, I've been able to correct past problems. But prevention and correction are handled differently. But when I couldn't avoid it, I could still correct it. And this is the course I'm working on making, and I hope to have at least some of it available by 2026. There's a process to it, and it has made such a big difference in my life that I just need to share it. And so with our 5 days of this DISH 101 mini course, hopefully you have gained a little bit of an understanding of the body's potential secret shield. I hope you take away with you the 5 keys I hoped I conveyed to you about DISH. And so there you have it. You made it. You are done with the DISH 101 mini course. I know that there was a lot of information in there that you may have never heard before. I hope you had time to process it and think about it. And because my goal here is to share hope. My desire is for you to have hope and empowerment as a result of taking this DISH 101 mini course. And if you are interested in more information, I have SWAYS, which is Start Winning Against Your Symptoms. And it's the first 7 steps I took towards having daily wins against my symptoms. I also have Moxie's short story case study. It's a short, quick read. I think it's a 1-hour audio on Google Play, but it tells Moxie's full story. And then I have my Health Backwards book. It's available in all forms, and it explains how I think the what, where, when, how, and all the stuff behind what I understand. It's in this book in a nutshell. And then coming soon, I'm hoping to have this after course available. It's called Altering Fields to Enable Recovery, because that is basically what we're doing when we're changing what is in our energy fields. And if you're ready to take next steps, you can find links at the bottom of the page where you can learn more about a personalized coaching, whether you want support with DISH, managing fatigue, or creating a clearer path of moving forward. With that being said, thank you for being here, and I appreciate you. I understand your struggles, and I just want to encourage you to not give up, to keep looking for answers, and to just stay as strong as you can and know that there's a God who loves you.